Have you ever noticed that most great things in life are not built under the spotlight? They are built in very ordinary moments. Early mornings when no one sees you. The repetitive hours of work with no applause. Long days when you wonder whether all this effort is really worth it. You see, many people dream about success. They imagine the moment of victory, when everyone stands up and applauds, when the final results appear, but they rarely imagine something else. The grind, the process repeated every day, the small things, the very slow progress almost invisible, and that is why so many people give up. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack dreams, but because they cannot accept the part of the journey that no one talks about. I have met many people in my life, people with extraordinary ability. They are intelligent, they have ideas, they have potential, but potential by itself does not create success. Potential is only a promise, and only discipline, repetition, and the daily grind can turn that promise into reality. The truth is this: success is not created in big moments. It is built through small principles that you apply every day. Principles that most people ignore. Principles that few people stay consistent with long enough to see results. So in today's video, I want to share with you 12 principles of the grind principles that can ensure real growth in your life. If you understand and apply them, you will begin to see something remarkable. Life does not become easier, you become stronger. And stay until the end of the video, because principle number 12 may completely change the way you see success in yourself. Principle 1, the grind no one applauds. I want to begin with a truth that very few people like to hear. Most great things in life are not built where there are lights. They are built in very quiet corners of life where there is no applause, no recognition, and sometimes no one watching. I call that the grind. When people think about success, they usually imagine beautiful moments. The moment you sign a big contract, the moment your career takes off, the moment people say you made it. But they rarely think about the hundreds of days before that. The days you wake up earlier than everyone else. The days you read a few extra pages while others are entertaining themselves. The days you keep working even though the results have not appeared yet. You see, success likes to hide. It does not like to appear in glamorous moments. It likes to appear in small, repeated actions that most people consider boring. I remember the early years when I started my career. In my imagination, everything would happen very quickly. I thought that if I just had a good idea, if I just worked hard for a short time, then a big opportunity would appear. But reality taught me a completely different lesson. Reality said, you need to read one more book. You need to make one more call. You need to go one more mile. You need to learn one more skill. And you need to do that more times than you think is necessary. That is where the grind begins. The grind is not a punishment. It is not something cruel that life imposes on you. The grind is the process of turning potential into capability. Many people have talent. Many people have dreams. Many people have wonderful plans. But without the grind, all of that remains unused potential. Have you ever met people like that? People who are very intelligent, very creative, very full of potential. But 5 years later, 10 years later, they are still in the same place. Not because they are not good enough, but because they never truly entered the grind. They wait for inspiration. They wait for opportunity. They wait for a big turning point. But the truth is this: life rarely changes because of one big moment. Life changes because of hundreds of small actions that you repeat every day. Every time you read one more page, every time you practice one more skill, every time you work a little longer after others have stopped, you are placing a brick in the foundation of your future. And when enough bricks are placed, one day you will look back and realize the great things in your life were not created on easy days. They were created on the days when no one saw you trying. So I want to ask you a question. Pause for a moment and think. In your life today, what is the grind that you are avoiding? What is the work you know you should do but keep postponing? Because many times, the door to a better life is not in new ideas. It is in returning to simple things and doing them long enough for them to begin producing results. And that brings us to the next principle. Because if the grind is the road to growth, there is one factor that determines whether you can walk that road to the end. Principle 2, discipline is more reliable than motivation. I want to tell you something I have learned after many years of observing people. Many people believe that success depends on motivation. They say, if I feel motivated, I will work hard. If I feel inspired, I will start changing. If I have inspiration, I will pursue my goals. It sounds reasonable, right? But there is a very big problem with that way of thinking. Motivation is not reliable. Motivation is like the weather. Some days are sunny, some days are rainy, some days the sky is completely gray. If you build your life based on the weather, you will have very few truly productive days. That is why I always tell people, do not rely on motivation. Rely on discipline. Discipline does not ask how you feel. Discipline does not ask whether you are inspired. Discipline asks only one simple question. Did you do what needed to be done today? You see, successful people are not people who always feel motivated. In fact, many successful people do not feel motivated every day at all. They simply have something else. They have the habit of acting even when they do not feel like it. They wake up when the alarm rings even though their body wants more sleep. They read when their mind wants entertainment. They work when their emotions say, taking a day off today would be fine. And those small moments create the difference. I have met many people in my life, people who started with explosive energy. They were very excited. They set big goals. They made detailed plans. In the first few weeks, they worked very hard. But then something happens. Life becomes busy. Some results do not appear as quickly as they expected. The initial excitement begins to fade. And when the motivation disappears, they stop too. Not because they lack ability, but because they place their trust in emotions instead of discipline. You see, discipline has a very special power. It helps you keep going when emotion has already left. It helps you keep the promises you make to yourself. And every time you do that, every time you act, even when you do not want to, you build something extremely valuable. You build self-respect. You begin to believe that you are a person who can do what needs to be done, not when it is convenient, not when it is easy, but even when it is difficult. And when that happens, a very big shift begins. You are no longer a person who acts only when inspired. You become a person who produces results through discipline. So I want to ask you a very honest question. Think about your goals. How many times have you started something with a lot of motivation, but then stopped when the motivation disappeared? That is not failure. It is simply a sign that you need to change your strategy. Do not build your future on something that changes every day. Build it on something more stable. Discipline. When you have discipline, you do not need to wait for inspiration. You only need to show up and work, day after day. And the interesting thing is that when you do that long enough, something remarkable begins to happen. Those repeated actions start to create a rhythm, a habit, a system, and that system will lead us to the next principle. Because people who achieve great results in life rarely rely on willpower every day. They rely on something far more powerful. Principle 3, daily routine creates extraordinary skill. There is something very interesting that I noticed when observing successful people in many different fields. Entrepreneurs, athletes, speakers, writers, they may do very different work, but they often share one very clear thing in common. They have a routine, a simple schedule that they repeat every day. You see, many people think extraordinary skill comes from extraordinary moments. They think that to become excellent, you must have big leaps, a big idea, a big opportunity, a big victory. But reality rarely works that way. Most skill in life is built through very small steps. 1 page of reading each day, 1 hour of practice each day, 1 call each day, 1 idea improved a little each day. These things sound very small, and that is why many people underestimate them. They say, it is just a little. How could that change anything? But they forget one thing, the power of repetition. I once told many people, if you read 10 pages a day, it does not seem like much. But try a simple calculation, 10 pages a day, 365 days a year. You have just read more than 3,600 pages. That is dozens of books every year. Now imagine doing that for 5 years or 10 years. You would become a completely different person. But the interesting thing is that in the early days, you will not see that change. You read for 1 day, nothing different. You read for 1 week, still nothing special. And that is when many people quit. They want to see results immediately. They want to feel that their effort is creating something big. But real growth rarely works that way. It works more like planting a tree. The first day you plant the seed, nothing happens. 1 week later, still just a tiny sprout. 1 month later, it is still fragile. If you only look at the results during the first few weeks, you might think, maybe this is not working. But what you do not see is what is happening underground. The roots are growing. The roots are going deeper into the soil. The roots are preparing for greater growth in the future. Routine works the same way. Every day you repeat a small action, you are building roots. 1 day of reading, 1 day of practice, 1 day of hard work. Nothing extraordinary happens immediately, but over time, those small actions begin to accumulate. Your skill becomes sharper, your confidence increases, your speed improves, and one day, other people look at you and say, "That is incredible, how did you become so good?" But they do not see the thousands of hours of practice before that. They only see the final result. So I want to ask you a question. What is your daily routine building? Is it building skill or building procrastination? Because every day you are practicing something. You might be practicing discipline, or you might be practicing delay. You might be practicing focus, or you might be practicing distraction. And over time, what you practice most will become who you are. That is why people who achieve great results do not wait for special days. They build ordinary days with structure. They wake up at a fixed hour. They work during a fixed period of time. They read, learn, and practice on a schedule. Not because they always feel inspired, but because they understand that routine creates steady progress. And when you maintain a routine long enough, something interesting begins to happen. You no longer have to push yourself as much as before. The actions that once felt very difficult begin to feel natural. The routine begins to carry you forward. But even if you have a good routine, there will be moments when you begin to feel something very familiar, a feeling that almost everyone experiences while pursuing growth. That feeling is discomfort. Because every time you try to become better, life will ask you to step outside your comfort zone. Principle 4, discomfort is the price of growth. There is a truth that most people know but very few truly accept. Growth always comes with discomfort. You cannot expand your life while keeping everything as easy as before. You cannot become stronger without experiencing some pressure. You cannot reach a new level without leaving your current comfort zone. But this is exactly where many people make a mistake. When things start becoming difficult, they think something is wrong. They tell themselves, "Maybe this is not for me. Maybe I am not good enough. Maybe I should find an easier path." But I want you to look at discomfort in a completely different way. Discomfort is not a sign of failure. Discomfort is often a sign of growth. Think about your body when you exercise. If you lift a very light weight, you can lift it easily. No pressure, no tension, but also no growth. Muscles only begin to grow when you lift a weight heavier than usual. When your body feels tension, when you must try a little harder, when you push yourself beyond your previous limits, human growth works the same way. Every time you learn a new skill, you will feel awkward at first. Every time you start a new job, you will feel uncertain. Every time you pursue a bigger goal, you will feel pressure. That is completely normal. I remember the early years when I began speaking in public. My first talks were not easy at all. I was nervous. I made mistakes. Sometimes, the audience was not as large as I hoped. There were moments when I wondered whether I should continue. But I realized something very important. That discomfort was not a signal to stop. It was a signal that I was growing. Every time I stood in front of an audience, whether small or large, I learned something. I learned how to speak more clearly. I learned how to tell stories better. I learned how to connect with the audience. And over time, what once made me nervous became something I could do naturally. You see, discomfort often appears exactly at the boundary between who you are now and who you could become. If you always stay in the safe zone, you will always keep your current abilities. But when you accept discomfort, you expand your limits. You are telling life, "I am ready to become better." The interesting thing is that successful people are not people who never feel difficulty. They simply do not run away from it. They understand that every big goal has a price. Time, effort, patience, and sometimes discomfort. So when you feel pressure during the process of growth, remember one thing. Do not ask, "Why is this so hard?" Ask, "Who is this helping me become?" Because every time you step through that discomfort, you are building a stronger version of yourself. And over time, what once frightened you will become something you can handle calmly. But discomfort is not the only challenge the grind brings. There is another challenge even more silent. It is not painful. It is not frightening, but it causes many people to give up. Principle 5, mastery is built through repetition. There is a challenge in the process of growth that very few people talk about. It is not failure. It is not pressure. It is not even difficulty. That challenge is repetition, or more simply boredom. You see, when you begin something new, everything usually feels exciting. You have a new goal, a new plan, a new source of energy. Every day feels fresh. But after a while, something begins to change. The work starts to feel familiar. The steps repeat themselves. Everything no longer brings the same sense of freshness as it did at the beginning. And that is exactly the moment when many people stop. Not because they are not capable enough, but because they begin to feel that this is boring. But this is exactly where the real difference begins to appear. Ordinary people usually look for novelty. They always want to try something new, a new project, a new idea, a new path. But people who truly achieve excellence do the opposite. They stay with the process of repetition. They understand that mastery is not built from constant change. Mastery is built from deliberate repetition. An athlete does not become great by trying a new technique every day. He becomes great by practicing the same technique thousands of times. A musician does not become excellent by playing a new song every day. He becomes excellent by practicing the same passage until every note becomes perfect. Life works the same way. The most important skills in your life are often built in moments that are not exciting at all. You read one more page. You practice one more skill. You do again something that you have done many times before. There are no fireworks. There is no applause. There is only you and the process. I remember there were seasons in my life when everything seemed very slow. Speeches practiced many times. Stories revised many times. Ideas reconsidered many times. There were days when I felt that I was doing the same thing over and over again. But those were exactly the days that created the greatest difference. Because with each repetition, you are not just repeating an action, you are refining it. A little clearer, a little more precise, a little better. Those small improvements may be very hard to notice in a single day, but over time, they begin to accumulate. And one day, you look back and realize that what once felt very difficult now feels natural. That is when mastery begins to appear. So I want to ask you a question. Are you leaving the process too early just because it has become boring? Because many people walk away right before the process begins to produce results. They look for new excitement, while real progress is sitting right inside the repetition they just left behind. Successful people understand something very important. They do not try to love every moment of the work. Instead, they learn to love the process of growth. They find joy in improving little by little, in becoming better than yesterday, even if only by a small fraction. And when you begin to see the process that way, repetition is no longer the enemy. It becomes your most powerful tool. But even if you accept repetition, there is still another challenge that many people face. A challenge even stronger than emotion or boredom. It is the way you build structure in your life. Because people who achieve great results rarely allow their progress to depend on emotion. They build something stronger. A system. Principle 6. Systems beat emotion. There is a mistake that many people make when they want to change their lives. They think they need stronger willpower. They say to themselves, I just need to try harder. I just need to be more determined. I just need to be more disciplined. But after many years of observing people, I realized something very interesting. People who achieve great results in life rarely rely on willpower every day. They rely on systems. You see, willpower is a limited source of energy. There are days when you feel very strong. You are full of energy. You can work for hours. But there are also completely different days. You are tired. You lose focus. You feel that everything is harder than usual. If your whole life depends on your emotions on days like that, you will move forward very slowly. But when you have a system, everything changes. A system is like the tracks of a train. Once the tracks have been laid down, the train just needs to keep moving. You do not have to make every decision again each day. You do not have to ask, should I work today? Should I practice today? Should I read today? That decision has already been made in advance. Your system has already answered that question. You wake up at a fixed time. You work during a fixed period of time. You learn and practice according to a clear structure. This may sound very simple, but those simple systems are exactly what create extraordinary results. Think about a professional athlete. He does not wait for inspiration to practice. He has a schedule. He knows exactly when he has to train. He knows exactly what he has to train. He knows exactly what he needs to improve. Or think about an entrepreneur. That person does not open their business only when they feel interested. They open the doors every day, whether it is sunny or rainy, no matter what mood they are in, because the system has been established. And over time, that system begins to carry them forward, even when they do not feel perfect. One of the greatest things about a system is that it reduces the battle in your mind. You no longer have to argue with yourself every day. You do not need to convince yourself that doing the right thing matters. You just need to follow the system. I have seen many people try to change their lives through big decisions. They say, Starting tomorrow, I will change everything. But life rarely changes that way. Life changes when you build a few small actions and repeat them every day. A system for reading, a system for practice, a system for learning. Each action may be very small, but when they are placed inside a stable structure, they begin to create forward momentum. You do not need to be perfect. You just need to show up and follow the system, day after day. And when you do that long enough, you will realize something very interesting. You no longer have to force yourself as much as before. The system begins to carry you forward. It is like a river. At first, you have to paddle a lot to start moving. But once you are in the current, the water begins to carry you. However, even if you have a good system, there is still another factor that determines the speed of your growth. It is the way your small actions accumulate over time. Because big changes in life rarely come from one big action. They come from many small actions repeated long enough. Principle 7. Small disciplines create massive results. There is something very interesting about personal growth that many people often do not notice at first. Big changes in life rarely begin with giant leaps. They usually begin with very small actions. Actions so small that many people think they do not matter. One page of reading, one phone call, one short workout, one small decision better than yesterday. Each individual action seems very ordinary. But when you begin repeating them every day, something very special starts to happen. They begin to accumulate. You see, growth in life usually does not happen in a straight line. It works more like compound interest in a bank. When you put a small amount of money into an account every day, at first you barely notice the change. The amount grows very slowly. But over time, money begins to create more money. Interest begins to create more interest. And after many years, that amount becomes a very large number. Discipline works in the same way. One day of reading may not change your life. One day of training may not turn you into a healthy person immediately. One day of hard work may not produce obvious results. But when you stack those days together, something begins to form. 1 week becomes 1 month. 1 month becomes 1 year. And 1 year becomes a new version of yourself. I have met many people who became discouraged when they started their journey of personal growth. After a few weeks, they said, "I have tried, but it seems like nothing has changed." But the truth is this. Big changes in life are often silent for a long time. You are improving your skills, but no one sees it yet. You are building new habits, but the results have not appeared yet. It is like a seed growing underground. For a long time, you do not see anything. But that does not mean nothing is happening. The roots are growing. The foundation is being built. And one day, the results begin to appear very quickly. People look at you and say, "That is surprising. Success came to you so fast." But you know that it was not fast at all. It was the result of hundreds of days of small discipline. You read a little more. You learn a little more. You improve a little more. Day after day. That is why I always advise people not to underestimate small actions. Small actions are the seeds of great results. If you want to change your life, you do not need to begin with a huge plan. You just need to begin with one small action and keep it long enough. A person who reads 10 pages a day will read dozens of books each year. A person who practices their skill every day will become excellent after a few years. A person who saves a small part of their income each month will build financial stability over time. Those small actions are not impressive on the first day, but over time they create a huge gap between people who stay consistent and people who quit. So I want to ask you a question. What small actions are you repeating every day? Because those actions are quietly building your future. You may not see the results today. You may not see the results next week. But if you continue long enough, the results will begin to appear. And when that happens, you will realize that life does not change because of big moments. It changes because of hundreds of small decisions you make every day. But there is something very important you need to understand. Not all effort needs to be intense. In many cases, what matters more is not intensity. What matters is consistency. Principle 8. Consistency beats intensity. There is a very common mistake that many people make when they begin changing their lives. They believe they need a huge effort. One extremely hard day of work. 1 week of non-stop training. One explosive season of energy. And it is true that those moments can feel very powerful. You feel like you are moving very fast. You feel like you are doing something big. But the problem is that explosive efforts like that rarely last. After a few days or a few weeks, the energy begins to fade. You get tired. You lose focus. You begin to return to your old rhythm of life. And when that happens, All those explosive efforts from before gradually disappear. That is why I always say, consistency matters more than intensity. A small action done every day is often far more powerful than one big action done only once. Imagine two people who want to improve their health. The first person trains very hard for 3 days. He trains until exhaustion. He pushes himself to the limit. But after those 3 days, he is too tired and stops. The second person trains for only 30 minutes a day. Not too heavy, not too stressful. But he does it every day for an entire year. Who do you think will achieve better results? In life, progress rarely belongs to the most explosive person. It usually belongs to the most persistent one. I once told many people often overestimate what they can do in one day. They think they can change everything immediately. But at the same time, they underestimate what they can do in 1 year. 1 year of small, consistent actions can completely change your life. 1 year of reading every day. 1 year of practicing every day. 1 year of learning and improving yourself. When you look back after a year like that, you will realize that you have gone much farther than you ever imagined. The interesting thing is that in the early days, that progress is very hard to notice. You read one more page, nothing special. You practice one more session, no major change. You work hard one more day, the results still have not appeared. But when you keep going long enough, those small changes begin to accumulate. Your skill becomes sharper. Your confidence increases. The way you think and act begins to change. And one day, you look back at the path you have traveled and realize you did not need giant leaps. You only needed to keep walking, day after day. That is the power of consistency. People who achieve great results rarely have perfect days. They also have tired days. They also have days with little motivation, but they still show up. They still work. They still take one more small step because they understand that each consistent day is a brick building their future. So I want to ask you a question. Are you waiting for an explosive moment, or are you building consistency every day? Because in life, the difference between people who achieve their goals and people who do not usually does not lie in talent. It lies in the ability to keep going when things become ordinary. But even if you are very consistent, there will still be times when things do not go the way you expected. You will make mistakes. You will fail. And the way you respond to those moments will determine whether you continue to grow or stop. Principle 9, failure is the grind's greatest teacher. There is something that many people fear when they begin pursuing a big goal. It is failure. They are afraid of making mistakes. They are afraid of doing something imperfectly. They are afraid that if they try and do not succeed, it will prove that they are not capable enough. And because of that fear, many people choose a safer path. They do not try. They do not take risks. They do not place themselves in situations that might cause them to fail. But I want you to see failure in a completely different way. Failure is not the enemy of growth. Failure is often your best teacher. You see, when everything goes perfectly, you rarely learn much. If every plan succeeded the first time, you would not know what you needed to improve. But when something does not work, you begin to pay attention. You begin to ask questions. What happened? What could have been done better? What needs to change? Those are the very questions that create growth. I remember there were times in my life when things did not go the way I expected. There were speeches that did not succeed the way I hoped. There were opportunities that did not produce the results I imagined. In those moments, it is easy to feel discouraged. But if you look deeper, you will realize that every failure carries a very clear lesson. It points out your weakness. It shows you which skill needs to improve. It helps you understand the path you are on more clearly. And if you are willing to learn from those lessons, failure becomes part of the growth process. Successful people are not people who never fail. In fact, many successful people have failed more times than most people. The difference lies in how they respond to those failures. They do not see failure as a sentence. They see it as information. Information about what needs adjustment. Information about what needs improvement. Information about the next step that needs to be taken. Each mistake becomes a lesson. Each failure becomes a step forward. And over time, all of those lessons begin to accumulate. You become wiser. You become more flexible. You understand more clearly what truly works. The interesting thing is that people who fear failure often think that avoiding failure will keep them safe. But in reality, avoiding failure usually means avoiding the opportunity to grow. If you do not try, you will not fail. But you also will not learn the lessons needed to move forward. So I want to ask you a question. What did your most recent failure teach you? If you look at it honestly, it may be trying to show you something very important, a skill that needs improvement, a strategy that needs to change, a new perspective you had never considered before. And when you begin to see failure that way, something interesting happens. You no longer fear it, you begin to use it. Every mistake becomes a small step forward. Every lesson becomes part of your maturity. But growth does not come only from what you do. It also comes from the environment around you. Because sometimes your discipline is not shaped only by your willpower. It is shaped by the people and the things around you every day. Principle 10, your environment shapes your discipline. There is something that many people often overlook when they talk about discipline. They think discipline depends entirely on personal willpower. They believe that if a person is strong enough, determined enough, they can remain disciplined in any circumstance. But after many years of observing people, I realized that there is another factor just as powerful. It is the environment. You see, people do not live in a vacuum. We live among the influences around us. The people we meet every day, the habits that exist in our environment, the conversations we regularly hear, all of those things quietly shape the way we think and act. If you spend time with people who are always looking for ways to grow, chances are you will begin to think that way too. You will hear them talk about the books they are reading. You will hear them talk about the goals they are pursuing. You will see them spend time on things that matter. And little by little, those behaviors begin to feel normal to you. But if the environment around you constantly encourages ease, procrastination, and short-term pleasures that will affect you in the same way, you will hear phrases like, "You can do it tomorrow," "just for today," "do not take it so seriously." And over time, those words begin to weaken your discipline. The interesting thing is that very few people realize the power of environment until they change it. I've seen many people try to build discipline in an environment that does not support them. They want to read, but everything around them is distraction. They want to work with focus, but the environment keeps pulling them away from their goals. In situations like that, they often think the problem is within themselves. But sometimes, the problem is not your willpower. The problem is your environment. Successful people understand this very clearly. They do not rely only on discipline. They design their environment so that discipline becomes easier. They place books where they are easy to see. They create workspaces that help them focus. They spend time with people who share the same goals. Each small change in the environment begins to create big changes in behavior. When the environment is right, many decisions become easier. You do not have to fight yourself so much. You just need to follow the flow of the positive environment you have created. So I want to ask you a question. Is your current environment supporting your growth or interfering with it? Do the people around you encourage you to become better? Does your workspace help you focus? Are the habits around you pulling you forward or pulling you back? Because when you change the environment, you do not only change what happens around you, you change the behaviors that environment encourages every day. And over time, those behaviors begin to shape who you become. But there is another truth you also need to understand. Sometimes to grow, you do not only need to change the environment. You need to be willing to let go of some familiar things, some old habits, some old comforts, because real growth always comes with a price. Principle 11, growth requires sacrifice. There is something that most people want in life. They want growth. They want success. They want a better life. They want to achieve more than they have right now. But there is one part of growth that many people do not like to hear. Growth always requires a trade-off. You cannot have everything the easy way. You cannot keep all your current comfort and at the same time expect a bigger future. Every new level in life requires you to give up something from the old level. Sometimes it is leisure time. Sometimes it is habits that no longer serve you. Sometimes it is the safety of staying in the familiar zone. You see, the comfort zone has a very strong pull. It is familiar. It is comfortable. It does not demand much from you. But the comfort zone also has a very clear limit. It can only give you results similar to what you already have. If you want a bigger life, you must be willing to step out of that zone. That may mean you have to wake up earlier. It may mean you have to work while others are resting. It may mean you have to spend time learning while others spend time on entertainment. Those choices are not always easy, but they are the choices that create the difference. I have met many people who said they wanted to change their lives. They said they wanted to achieve more, but when the moment of trade-off appeared, they began to hesitate. They want the results, but they do not want to pay the price. They want success, but they do not want to leave their comfort. And that is exactly why so many people remain in the same place for years. Not because they do not have the ability, but because they are not willing to make the necessary trade-offs. People who achieve great things in life understand one very simple truth. They understand that every choice has a price. If you choose ease today, the price may be regret tomorrow. But if you choose discipline today, the reward may be a more open future. No one can avoid paying a price. The only question is how you want to pay it. Do you want to pay with the short-term difficulty of discipline, or do you want to pay with the long-term regret of not trying? When you see life that way, many decisions become clearer. You begin to understand that sacrifice today is not a loss. It is an investment in the person you are becoming, an investment in the life you want to build. And over time, those small sacrifices begin to create great opportunities, new skills, new relationships, doors you had never imagined before. But there is one final step in the process of growth that many people do not realize. At first, you work hard to achieve a goal. You want a specific result, but after a while, the most important thing is no longer that goal. The most important thing becomes who you are becoming in the process. And that is exactly the final principle. Principle 12, growth must become your identity. There is a very special moment in every person's growth journey. At first, you work hard for a result. You want success in your career. You want to improve your finances. You want to achieve a specific goal. You think that if you can reach that goal, everything will change. But after a while, if you stay consistent long enough, you will realize something interesting. The goal is no longer the most important thing. The most important thing is the person you have become in the process. You see, many people pursue success as if it were a destination. They think there is some point in the future where everything will be perfect. They say to themselves, when I achieve this, I will be satisfied. When I achieve that, I will feel successful. But life rarely works that way. As soon as you achieve one goal, another goal appears. As soon as you reach one mountain peak, you begin to see a higher one. If you only pursue results, you may spend your whole life running from one goal to another. But there is another way of seeing it, a deeper way. Instead of only pursuing results, you begin to pursue your own growth. You do not work only to achieve something. You work to become a better person. You do not practice only to win a competition. You practice to become a person who always gives their best. You do not read books only to gain more knowledge. You read because you have become a person who is always learning. That is the greatest shift. Growth is no longer a temporary task. It becomes part of who you are. When that happens, the grind is no longer something you have to endure. It becomes something you are proud of. Early mornings are no longer a burden. They become an opportunity. The repetitive hours of practice are no longer boring. They become the way you build yourself. You begin to find joy in the process, in becoming a little better every day. And when you reach that point, something interesting happens. You no longer need to chase success. Success begins to chase you, not because you are looking for it, but because you have become the kind of person who can create it. You have discipline. You have consistency. You have the habits and systems that allow you to keep growing. Those qualities begin to open new doors, new opportunities, new relationships. And one day, when you look back on your journey, you will realize that the greatest reward is not money or fame. The greatest reward is the person you have become, a stronger person, a more persistent person, a person who understands that growth is not a destination. It is a way of life. So today, I want to leave you with a question. Do not just ask, what do I want to achieve in life? Ask a deeper question. Who do I want to become? Because when growth becomes your identity, every other goal begins to fall into its proper place. You no longer need to force life. You only need to keep growing, day after day. And that is the final secret of the grind. Do not try to escape it. Let it shape who you become. You and I have been given the same gift. That gift is today. A day to read one more page. A day to practice one more skill. A day to take one more small step on your path. Those steps may be very small. No one may see them. But if you continue long enough, those small steps will build a life you are proud of. If this video gave you a new perspective, press like so more people can reach these lessons. And if you want to continue your growth journey with deep principles like these, subscribe so you do not miss the next videos. Now I want to hear from you. Out of the 12 principles today, which one will you begin applying starting today? Share it in the comments. Because sometimes, one small decision today can become the major turning point of tomorrow. And remember one thing, if you can master one day, you can master an entire life. See you in the next video.